So glad you're back with me today, and we're going to continue talking about King David. I don't know if you like this teaching or not, but I do, because I'm so fascinated by King David. He's such a good guy. Like all of us, he made some bad decisions. He was impulsive. Sometimes he got himself in trouble because he moved too fast. But most of the time, he consulted God before he made his next move, his next decision. And I love the way he had God interacting with him on these decisions. So I want to go to King David part 2 now, and talk a little bit more about what all was going on with David's life. You know, it's a long story, King David, but he is the king. He is God's chosen. I know we talked previously about Saul having been anointed as king, and he was. But David also was anointed as king from the time he was a kid, and now he's come into his kingship. So he was anointed as king, or officially installed as king in Hebron, which is one of the holy cities of Israel. And he stayed there for 7 years. He fought some wars out of Hebron. He did several things, but he was the king of Judah in Hebron. And so when Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was dethroned, Israel all the tribes came to David and said, "We want you as our king." And so they anointed him as king over all of Israel, not just Judah. And then he moved, at God's instruction, he moved his headquarters to Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem today is huge, and it's walled. It's the old city and the new city and all that kind of stuff. But at that time, Jerusalem was teeny tiny, and it belonged to the Jebusites. And even that was like almost nothing. They had already purchased the threshing floor on Mount Moriah. They purchased that years ago. So now they had that much. They, being the Jews, owned that much of Jerusalem. And so now David had to go to war with the Jebusites to take it back. It was a holy war. It wasn't something he just decided to do. He did it with God's instructions. And so once he took Jerusalem back, he then put the name Jerusalem on it, which is City of Peace. And then he began to reign out of there. He was a mighty warrior. He took 30,000 men and went to Kiriath Yearim to bring back the Ark of God that had been captured and stored there. Now, if you remember, the Philistines had captured the Ark of God when they were at war with Saul. And they had taken it down to Gaza. And this really broke David's heart. It would be a tragic thing for the Ark of God, which contains so much power within itself. Now, this is not like Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of power, but this is power. I actually thought Raiders of the Lost Ark, they did a pretty good job of explaining that or showing that. But this is the power of God. And David was already functioning under the power of God, but this was a little bit more. And so what he did with it then was he went to get it, and they went with a buggy or a cart, and they loaded the ark onto the cart. And David was dancing. He was 30,000 men, so they're going to protect it. Nobody's going to take it from David. He's going to keep that ark. And so they took the 30,000 men and went to Kiriath Yearim to bring back the Ark of God, and been captured and stored there. And they were bringing it up towards Jerusalem. Now, all roads go up, because Jerusalem is on a mountaintop. You can't go to Jerusalem without going up. I guess you could if you're in a helicopter. You could land there. But you have to go up to go to Jerusalem. So as they're going up, they brought the cart to a stop, and it started to tip. And Uzzah reached out to touch the ark to keep it from toppling off of the cart. Made God mad. Just like that. Made God mad. So God killed Uzzah. Well, now I have to tell you, that scared everyone. What happened here? And so David decided he wouldn't take the ark any further. And so they were there. He took the ark to the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite, where it remained for 3 months. Now, you might ask, why did he do that? I don't know why or how he chose Obed-Edom. I just know that he chose him, and maybe he didn't like him and thought, well, okay, if he dies, it's no big deal. Or maybe he really liked him and he thought he was righteous enough that he could protect the ark. Let's go with the righteous aspect of it, okay? So he takes the ark to the house of Obed-Edom, and somehow they manage to transfer it there, and then they go off. It's there for 3 months. And during those 3 months, Obed-Edom just prospers like great. And everything is super with Obed-Edom. And word gets back to David, hey, something's going on down there, because Obed-Edom is doing very well. He's doing well spiritually. He's doing well financially. His family's great. And so David comes to realize that maybe it's okay for them to finish moving the ark on up to Jerusalem. He wanted to take it to the city of David, where he was living. And so they go to get the ark, and they're dancing, and they're going up to Jerusalem with it. 2 Samuel 6:16 refers to this. It says, as the ark of the Lord entered the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, looked out the window and saw King David leaping and whirling before the Lord, and she despised him for it. Well, give me a break, Michal. Okay, Michal was David's first wife. And if you remember, early on, when David was quite young, Saul promised her to David, but he had to go get foreskins of, I don't know, Philistines or something. Anyhow, so she was his first wife. Well, then Saul got mad at David one time when David was gone, so he takes Michal and gives her to another man. I mean, really? Can you imagine that happening today? I just can't imagine it happening. Well, anyhow, so David marries other women, but he still loved Michal. And so here he is. He's dancing before the Lord with the ark. He's offering sacrifices every 6 paces. He stops. He offers a sacrifice. He offers up burnt offerings. He does everything righteous and holy before the Lord. And he's dancing like a crazy guy, before the Lord and all this other stuff. And he gets up to the city of David, and Michal is looking out a window and watching all this stuff. And she gets ticked off. She's actually jealous, I do believe, of David's love for God. Also, she apparently loved her husband that they took her from. Abner brought her to David, because she's just mad. She's an angry woman. She needs to go for Dr. Phil. Well, anyhow, she gets mad. She curses David. And so they had a fight. Yeah, they had a fight. It happens in the Bible. And because of that, God sealed up her womb, and she never had a child. So imagine, I skipped this thing I wanted to talk about for just 1 second here. After they dedicated the ark in the city of Jerusalem, everybody was in attendance. Now, I don't know who everybody is. Like, did everybody that lived in the land of Canaan come? But when it was all over and done with the dedication, David gave all the people who were there a loaf of bread, a cake made in a pan, and a raisin cake. Imagine just the logistics of all that. And being a woman who cooks occasionally for a lot of people, and I can really get tired. I wonder who was doing all this cooking and the pressing of the raisin cakes and all this other stuff. Well, I'm sure he had staff. I'm sure he had a lot of staff. But still, that's a lot of logistics and everything else there. So anyhow, they had the fight. God seals her womb. She never has a child. David settled in. Now he's at peace. He settled in. Everything is going well. But he feels bad about the fact that he has a lovely home and God doesn't have anything. God's still living in a tent. And so he wants to build a home for God. But Nathan, the prophet of the era, said to David, go and do whatever you have in mind, for the Lord is with you. But that night, God came back to Nathan, and the prophet, with a different message. And he said in 2 Samuel 7, verses 5 through 7, go and say to my servant David, thus says the Lord, are you the one who shall build me a house to dwell in? For I have not dwelt in a house since the day I brought up the sons of Israel from Egypt, even to this day. Now, it's been several hundred years now. But I had been moving along in a tent. It's kind of like he had his own travel trailer and he's going with him. And he said, I've been living in a tabernacle. Wherever have I gone with all the sons of Israel? Did I speak a word with one of the tribes of Israel, which I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, saying, why have you not built me a house of cedar? Basically, he said, hey, I don't need a new house. What I need is the house that I'm in, the tabernacle that I'm in. I just need you to love me. I just need you to worship me. I need you to appreciate me. But you don't have to build me a house. So then God continued with his word for David. He says, I will give you rest from all your enemies. The Lord also declares to you that the Lord will make a house for you. That means a castle, a kingship. Doesn't mean like a castle like what Buckingham Palace, but it means a kingship. When your days are complete and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your descendant after you, who will come forth from you, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. Then David the king went and sat before the... Oh, I skipped that one. Okay. So many times, David was the target of what was... of everything. You know, it's kind of like he had a target on his back. You know, it would have been a real coup if another army could have captured him, killed him, or something like that. And when they would go out to battle, it was always the king or the generals or the mighty warriors who were the ones they wanted to get, because if they got them, then they would annihilate the rest of the people, because it would take the wind out of the battle. So David had become so successful that there was more and more. It's almost like he had a price on his head. He didn't. It was kind of like that. I mean, people were hungry to kill him, people of other nations. So Joab, his leader, said to him, okay, it's like this. You stay home. We're going out to battle. It's in the springtime when kings go out to battle. He said, we're going out to battle now. But you stay home because it's too dangerous for you to be out there. Actually, he'd probably been better off if he'd gone to battle, because he stayed home and he got himself in trouble. Now, if you've been to Israel, and if you haven't, I hope you go. But if you've been to Israel, so you know over here is Mount Moriah. You know, it's not like it's going up on what? Pikes Peak. But it's Mount Moriah. And then there's the foothills, kind of. It comes down like this. So the city of David is in the foothills. He's going to build, the idea was he would build a temple on top of the mountain. And he's living down here. So living down here, he's not down, he's here, high up in the foothills. And so he goes outside. You know, it gets warm in the spring. It gets warm quite rapidly in Israel. And so he goes outside of his home, his palace, whatever you want to call it at that time. And he's just strolling around outside on the roof. And he's looking down through the valley and all the stuff. He's killing time. That's what he's doing. He's bored. And over here on this other roof, down here, he sees this woman taking a bath. Now, he should have turned around and walked away. Should have. But he didn't. So he stopped and he stared, because she was exquisitely beautiful. I guess he was a voyeur at that moment. And so he asked, who is she? And so his servant said, well, she is the wife of Uriah, one of your leading warriors. So David said, bring her to me, because he knew that Uriah was out in the battle with Joab and the army. So they brought her to him, Uriah the Hittite. He brought the beautiful wife to him. And they had conjugal relations. Now, just think about this. I mean, this is the Me Too day, you know, where everybody is claiming that they also were sexually abused, forced into a sexual relationship. Well, if you stop and think about, what about Bathsheba? Was she complicit in this thing? Obviously, she got pregnant. So was she complicit in it, or was she forced into it, or what? How did this all come down? I don't know. But so she slept with David, and they got pregnant. Now, that's a problem, when he finds out she's pregnant and Uriah hasn't been home, somebody's going to wonder who's been in the kitchen with Mama. So he sends for Uriah. He says, send Uriah to me with a report. So here comes Uriah up on the hilltop to David, gives him a report of what's going on. The reason David wanted Uriah, because he thought that once he was giving him the report, then David said to him, now go home, get a good night's rest. Well, most people would do that, but Uriah didn't do that. Instead of going home to his beautiful wife, he stayed just outside the gates of the castle and with the other military people, and he didn't go home. Therefore, he didn't sleep with his wife. Therefore, there couldn't be any sexual interaction, and she couldn't say this is his baby. So now they have a real problem. So when he goes back to the fields, to the where the battle is the next day, David sends him with a note, a sealed note to Yoav. And he says to him, put Uriah on the front lines of the battle, up front near the heat. Put him there. Because David is thinking, if Uriah is killed, and Bathsheba is a widow, then David can get by with marrying her and nobody's going to think anything about it. They'll have his child, it's Uriah's child. Nobody's going to question this. And Uriah won't be around to say, well, it's not my kid. So that's what happens. Uriah gets put in the front line. They're going into the city. And as they go into the city, he's killed. Something falls on him and he's killed. And so as a message is sent back to David via courier. The battle was very intense. This is what was happening. And by the way, Uriah is dead. Now, they didn't ask why they wanted Uriah killed. That was nobody's business. The king said it, so just do it. Not exactly representation by, not holiness, but anyhow, that's what happened. So, now this is the story. In 2 Samuel 12, 1 through 3, we see God entering in on this scene. Now, Nathan the prophet figures out what's going on. God told him, we can do whatever we want to do in our closets, but don't think we're going to get by with it. God knows exactly what's going on. So he sends Nathan to David with this little statement. And he says, in 1 Samuel 12, there were two men in one city, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a great many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing except one little lamb, which he bought and nourished. When it grew up together with him and his children, it would eat of his bread and drink of his cup and lie in his bosom, and it was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler, someone who didn't belong, came to the rich man, and he was unwilling to take from his own flock or his own herd to prepare the way for the wayfarer who had come to him. Rather, he took the poor man's ewe lamb and prepared it for the man who had come to him. Wow. David was mad. He was really, really mad. And he says, this guy, the guy that did this, he's going to pay for this 4 times. 4 times what he did. And then Nathan said, guess what, old king? You're the man. You took Bathsheba, the only wife of Uriah, and you're going to pay for it. And the child in her womb will die. Whoops. Kind of a sad story there. So David repented to Nathan. He said, I'm sorry I did it. I'm sorry. I stand guilty before the Lord. And Nathan said, the Lord has remitted your sin, wiped it clean. You shall not die. However, since you spurned the enemies of the Lord by this deed, even the child about to be born to you shall die. And Nathan went home, and the Lord afflicted the child that Uriah's wife Bathsheba bore to David, and the baby became critically ill. And David prayed. He fasted and he prayed. He fasted and he prayed. He didn't eat anything. He didn't take a bath. He didn't do anything to clean up. And his servants were watching him thinking, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And they didn't know what to do. And then all of a sudden, David kind of catches on. that there's a change in tone in their conversations. And he looks up at them and he says, "Did the child die?" And they said, "Yes, he died." And so David got up, washed his face, cleaned up, took a bath, went on about his life. And they said, "Well, we don't understand this because we thought with this baby dying, you prayed. We thought when the baby died, we were afraid to tell you because we thought you would go ballistic." And he said, "No, as long as the child was alive, there was a hope. There was a glimmer of hope that God might change his mind, but he didn't. And so now the child is gone." So then he goes in to Bathsheba, and he consoled her, and she conceived again and bore another child for David, and this child's name was Solomon. And the Lord favored him and named the child Jedediah. Now, by now, David's personal household had grown by leaps and bounds. He had many sons and daughters by his many wives. David's own words, that the man who took the one ewe lamb would pay fourfold, came to fruition. The child of David and Bathsheba died. Number one. Amnon, his son, raped Tamar, his daughter. Absalom, another son, arranged for a family gathering and killed Amnon for the rape of Tamar. Then Absalom tried to overthrow his father's kingdom and dies in the process. Need to think sometimes about the words that come out of our mouths, don't we? I know I do. Zip the lip. Well, when Absalom tried to overthrow his father's kingdom, he almost succeeded, and then he died. He had this wild hair, really thick, very, very kinky, curly, but wild. You know how sometimes people with that hair, I just always want to run my fingers through it. It's unmanageable. And so he's on a horse, he's riding through the forest, and his hair gets caught in a branch of a tree and pulls him off of his horse, and then they are able to kill him. Joab, his trusted warrior, went to David and told him that had happened. And David mourned. Oh my goodness, he mourned and mourned and mourned for the loss of his son Absalom. Now, scripture doesn't say this, so this is according to Margie, but I think maybe David felt some guilt over the loss of Absalom because of the words that had come out of his mouth at the death of his child with Bathsheba. Anyhow, Joab finally said, "Hey, knock it off." He said, "Our men go out and fight like crazy, and they stood with you through this coup that was going on, and they helped you through it. And yet here you are, you're mourning the one who wanted to overthrow you. Not only had he tried to overthrow him, he tried just to take the whole kingdom." David actually fled from him for a while. In his waning days, David was old. He was constantly cold. His courtiers said to him, Yet let a young virgin be sought for my lord the king, to wait upon his majesty and be his attendant, and let her live in your bosom, and my lord the king will be warmed." Now, too bad they didn't have electric blankets, wasn't it? But they didn't. So they get this really cute, beautiful, sexy young chickie and bring her in to David. Now, he's old. Things just don't work anymore. And he's in bed and he's cold, and he probably didn't even think anything about her. And so she was exceedingly beautiful. She became the king's attendant, but the king was not intimate with her. Adonijah, David's son, the Haggith, was bragging that he was going to be the king. Now, okay, get the scene. Picture this. David's in his bed, lying, about to die. Adonijah is walking around, strutting his stuff, saying, "I'm about to be king." As soon as the old man croaks, I'm in. He even goes to the point of having himself appointed king. He goes out. He takes with him some of the people. They go down. They have this big sacrificial meal. He's anointing himself as king. Dad is not dead yet, but he's already superseding. And Nathan, the prophet, hears about it. So he goes to Bathsheba. He tells her. He sends Bathsheba into David, who's lying in his bed dying, and says, "This is what's happening." Bathsheba gets on her mama shoes. She runs into David and bows before him and says, "This is what's going on. And you promised me that my son, our son, Solomon would be king. And here Adonijah is setting himself up as king, already announcing it. So David snaps to, still in bed, snaps to. He says, okay, this is what we're going to do. And so he gives the instructions. And he said, take Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah son of Jehoiada, and take them. Then they came before the king. The king said to them, take my loyal soldiers and have my son Solomon ride on my mule. Remember, kings riding on mules? And bring him down to Gihon. Let the priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan anoint him there, king over Israel, whereupon you shall sound the horn and shout, long live King Solomon. And that was what they did. Adonijah heard all, and all the guests were with him, heard all this noise, the horns blowing and the shouting and the singing. And David instructed Solomon. And so Adonijah was out, Solomon was in. Then David instructed Solomon, saying, I'm going the way of all the earth. Be strong and show yourself a man. And he gives him a list of things that he was supposed to do, how he was to obey God. He was to follow the commandments, the laws, the teachings, the admonitions of Moses. And all you succeed, whatever you undertake and wherever you turn, then the Lord will fulfill the purpose, the promise that he made concerning me, if your descendants are scrupulous. And then he also gave him a vendetta list. Go out and get these guys. I couldn't kill them, but you can. Take care of my unfinished business. And so Solomon said he would. And then Dad died, and they mourned him. And all of Israel came to the funeral, buried the king, and instituted Solomon as king. Now we're going to pick up in the next session. We're going to start talking about King Solomon. Remember, this is the stories of the kings of Israel. Shalom, Shalom, Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.